If you're looking for the purpose of human life, you might find it in these pages. Hello everyone, I'm Eric. Welcome to Read the Right Thing Book Reviews. Thanks for tuning in. It's been several weeks since I posted, so if you're a new follower here, thanks for subscribing, and I hope you enjoy this channel where I review books. I'm always looking forward to reading Kurt Vonnegut. In my opinion, everyone could use a little more Vonnegut in their lives. I'm also excited for a documentary on Vonnegut coming out, I believe in November. I first saw the trailer a year or two ago and it's kind of struggled to come out, but I think finally it's about to come out. Slaughterhouse-Five, which is a book I read in college, is one of my favorite books, but I don't really know a lot about Vonnegut himself. I know he's from Indiana, I know he served in the military and was in Dresden when it was bombed, but that's about it. That's all I really know. I mean, I've watched some interviews and I've read some bios, but this documentary really looks like an intimate look at the author. Sirens of Titan is Vonnegut's second novel. Last year I reviewed his first novel, Player Piano, so I'll put that link in the description if you've read that too. Player Piano didn't necessarily resemble the Vonnegut of Slaughterhouse-Five that I knew. But in Sirens, Vonnegut really starts to write with that black humor and brilliance similar to Slaughterhouse-Five. Sirens was published in 1959 and is classified as comedy sci-fi. Now, I'm not a huge fan of science fiction. In fact, I usually completely steer clear of the genre, whether it's books or movies. Although the story does take place in space and features the cliches of flying saucers, aliens, and a Martian invasion, it doesn't feel overly sci-fi. Everything is very real and human. There are characters who struggle through loneliness, isolation, and whether or not there is a free will. There's a new religion, black humor, war, and a prescient vision of the purpose of human life given by a robot alien of all people. This story is essentially a road trip story. The main character, Malachi Constant, travels through space with friends and a beautiful woman. Only it's much more lonely and darker than that. This book would also make a great movie. And at one point, Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead owned the rights to the movie. If the science fiction genre is a turnoff for you, just know I'm not a huge fan of the genre and I was still able to enjoy this book. Vonnegut studied chemistry, biology, and mechanical engineering in college. He's a really big science guy, so it's no wonder that he would write in this genre. His brother and most of his friends were scientists. Vonnegut said, "I understand how scientific reasoning and playfulness work, even though I have no talent for joining in. I enjoy the company of scientists and am easily excited and entertained when they tell me what they're doing." Vonnegut said in multiple interviews that he spent more time with scientists than literary people. Now, I know next to nothing about science, but the way Vonnegut uses science and science fiction in his stories is entertaining and funny. Vonnegut makes the genre way more accessible to lovers of realistic literature like myself. So just a heads up, this review is going to contain a lot of spoilers. I'm going to talk about most of the plot. So if you want to read the book first, then come back to this review, that would probably be wise. And go read the book, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. If you're looking for the purpose of human life, you might find it in these pages. A narrative voice introduces the story by telling us that at one point, not everyone knew how to find the purpose of life like they do now. This story happens sometime between World War II and the Third Great Depression. So the exact time period of this story is left vague so it can reflect any decade or time period post-World War II. So technically this could be happening now. And until there's a Third Great Depression, this book will hold up. It could be any time from then until the future. And some of the characters resemble popular businessmen, religious figures, and politicians of today. So how do you find the meaning of life when you can't even name one of the 53 portals into the soul? You could end up stumbling upon it if you are forced to go on a wild ride through space. The book is about the meaning of life, but also about so much more. It's about religion, war, loneliness, isolation, freedom, and free will. It's funny, sad, touching, and thought-provoking. And although it's science fiction, it's rooted in the human experience. Vonnegut often takes characters away from Earth into space, but it's always rooted in this human experience and emotion. After the narrative voice introduces the story really begins with a crowd outside a Newport, Rhode Island mansion. The crowd is eager to be close to a man and a dog who will soon materialize out of thin air inside the mansion. This crowd is dispersed by the police, and Malachi Constant, the richest man in America, pulls up in a limo. Malachi Constant was invited to this materialization by Beatrice Rumford. Beatrice's husband is the man who's going to materialize, and he insisted that she invite Malachi. Winston Niles Rumford was a wealthy space traveler headed toward Mars when he crashed into a chronosynclastic infundibula. Now this is the part that I usually get turned off on. It's stuff like this. Kind of these weird made-up things that I'm not sure if they exist or not, but how Vonnegut describes it is really funny. Almost any brief explanation of chronosynclastic infundibula is certain to be offensive to specialists in the field. Be that as it may, the best brief explanation is probably that of Dr. Cyril Hall, which appears in the 14th edition of A Child's Cyclopedia of Wonders and Things to Do. The article is here reproduced in full with gracious permission from the publishers. Chronosynclastic infundibula. Just imagine that your daddy is the smartest man who ever lived on the earth, and he knows everything there is to find out, and he is exactly right about everything, and he can prove he is right about everything. Now imagine another little child on some nice world a million light years away, and that little child's daddy is the smartest man who ever lived on that nice world so far away. And he is just as smart and just as right as your daddy is. Both daddies are smart and both daddies are right. Only if they ever met each other, they would get into a terrible argument because they wouldn't agree on anything. Now you can say that your daddy is right and the other little child's daddy is wrong, but the universe is an awfully big place. There is room enough for an awful lot of people to be right about things and still not agree. The reason both daddies can be right and still get into terrible fights is because there are so many different ways of being right. There are places in the universe, though, where each daddy could finally catch on to what the other daddy was talking about. These places are where all the different kinds of truths fit together as nicely as the parts in your daddy's solar watch. We call these places chronosynclastic infundibula. The solar system seems to be full of chronosynclastic infundibula. There is one great big one we are sure of that likes to stay between Earth and Mars. We know about that one because an Earthman and his Earth dog ran right into it. You might think it would be nice to go to a chronosynclastic infundibulum and see all the different ways to be absolutely right, but it is a very dangerous thing to do. The poor man and his poor dog are scattered far and wide, not just through space, but through time too. Chrono means time, synclastic means curved toward the same side in all directions, like the skin of an orange. Infundibulum is what the ancient Romans like Julius Caesar and Nero called a funnel. If you don't know what a funnel is, get mommy to show you one. This is sort of how Vonnegut makes sci-fi so accessible. Just when he could get overly scientific and bore us to death, he writes something funny that a child would understand. Since Rumford crashed into the chronosynclastic infundibulum, or like the black hole type thing, he has been materializing inside the Newport mansion every 59 days. Rumford is unstuck in time, just like Billy Pilgrim in Slaughterhouse-5. Now this is where things start to get kind of weird and interesting. Constant is told by Winston that he will be bred like a farm animal by Martians with Beatrice on Mars. And not only that, but Malachi would visit Mars, Mercury, Earth again, and then go to Titan, a moon off of Saturn. Malachi assures Rumford that he's not going anywhere. Why would he leave Earth? He has all the money, fame, and women he needs. Winston shows Malachi a picture of 3 women more beautiful than anything he's ever seen. These 3 women are the Sirens of Titan. But even after seeing this picture, Malachi assures him and does everything in his power to not fulfill Rumford's prediction. He sends Beatrice nasty letters so that she'll stay away from him, and he goes on a real bender in California. Beatrice also has no interest in seeing Malachi again. So here's 2 people destined to be together who are doing everything in their power not to end up together. What we learn is that no matter how much you try to control your life, you end up right where you're going to end up. Through a series of events and strings pulled by Rumford, Malachi Constant goes bankrupt and ends up on Mars, and at some point was bred with Beatrice. Rumford wasn't lying. He gives matter-of-factly the whole plot of the book right there. Malachi is talked into going to Mars after he loses his whole fortune. Before I get to the rest of my review of Sirens of Titan, please hit that like button. It would just get this video out to more people who would enjoy it. I would really appreciate it. We first see the vast armies of Mars and are introduced to a man named Unk. The Martian armies are full of human soldiers who have been recruited or abducted. They are marching to parade grounds to the beat of a snare drum. It seems Vonnegut is introducing all new characters, but then it's soon apparent that Unk is Malachi. Unk is confused and doesn't remember anything other than being discharged from a hospital. The hospital told him that he was a soldier and that he should always obey direct orders. At the parade grounds, Unk is controlled to march, salute, and stand at attention through an antenna that was placed in his head. It feels painful and he thinks, well, life is just like this sometimes. It's kind of funny that a man with no memory or recollection of even where he is already making assumptions on how life is. Unk is ordered to march to a man chained to a post in the parade grounds and strangle him to death. Before he dies, the man whispers into Unk's ear the location where he will find a letter. Unk finds this letter and it lists truths that he has learned. He learns that his memory is wiped clean pretty frequently. All of the soldiers are admitted to this hospital where their memories are wiped clean. He learned he's a soldier, he has a son and wife on Mars, and he also has a friend named Stony Stevenson. Unbeknownst to Unk, the man that he strangled actually was Stony. He also learns that these soldiers are controlled through antennas placed in their heads, and that a few select people have remote controls that control these antennas. Unk decides to escape so he can hopefully find his wife and son, and he hopes that they'll leave together so they can go somewhere and just live peacefully. He meets up with his son Chrono, who is playing this thing called German bat-ball during recess. Chrono is an independent boy with a lucky metal piece that helps him excel in school and German bat-ball. Beatrice is a teacher who helps new recruits learn to breathe on Mars. They take these little pills that helps them breathe oxygen so they don't have to breathe. But they have to learn to, not breathe, that just their body is now going to accept oxygen from this pill. Unk tries to convince them, unsuccessfully, to leave with him. Unk has another friend named Boaz, it seems. Boaz is one of the people who controls Unk and the other soldiers with this remote. Before he can get his wife and son to leave, all this stuff starts to happen and the invasion starts to take place. While en route to the invasion of Earth, Unk and Boaz are redirected to Mercury, where they will just wait it out a couple years. And this is all orchestrated by Rumford. The spaceship actually only has an on-off switch, and the rest of the controls and the routes are predetermined. So even though they look like these elaborate spaceships, they're really quite simple. And all the controls are just to give the facade that these soldiers have some control over what's going to happen. In the spaceship, there are these sensors on the bottom of the ship that find the bottom of Mercury. It dove into deep caves thinking that Mercury was actually Earth. So Unk and Boaz are on Mercury, where the only living things are these creatures, and they're these little diamond-shaped things called harmoniums. Unk and Boaz try to leave Mercury, but the ship keeps slamming into the cave walls and they can't leave. All while this is happening, the Martian invasion happens, and this is a very funny part of the book, this war between Mars and Earth. I was totally expecting some huge intergalactic space war akin to Star Wars or something, but nope. The Martians get absolutely dominated by the Earth, and the war doesn't even last long. Turns out the Martian invasion was completely unprepared and ill-equipped. Rumford knew this was exactly what was going to happen, and the only reason he directed this Martian invasion was so he could introduce a new religion to Earth. During the Martian invasion, Unk and Boaz are on Mercury. Boaz actually takes a liking to these harmoniums, who feed off vibrations and music. Unk takes to exploring different caves, and he sees harmoniums arranged in different riddles. They keep prodding him to think and to solve these riddles, kind of toying with him. It turns out this is all Rumford. He materializes on Mercury every once in a while, and he places these harmoniums without Unk knowing it. So it's just Rumford that's still toying with Unk. All the while, Unk is trying to figure out how to get off Mercury. And another humorous part of the book is when the harmoniums spell out to Unk that all he needs to do is just turn the spaceship upside down. The sensor on the bottom will then think it's going up into the sky, and it'll sense where the walls and the ceilings are so it can leave Mercury. It's a moment that is so simple but so good that I wish I would have solved the riddle before, and I think it's just classic Kurt Vonnegut humor. Unk figures this out, and he goes to Boaz and he says, "Hey, let's get out of here. All we got to do is turn the spaceship upside down, and then we can leave." But Boaz has found something beautiful on Mercury. Boaz found that his purpose is to care for the harmoniums. He really just wants to help them have a joyous existence. He feels redeemed from his previous life of hurting people because he used to hurt people with those antennas so much. He decides that he doesn't want to hurt anything or anyone anymore, but he just wants to stay here and care for these harmoniums. So now Malachi/Unk, he leaves Boaz and he returns to Earth. Before he returns, Rumford has established his new church on Earth that is called the Church of God, the Utterly Indifferent. Rumford has prophesied and made predictions of the future that a space wanderer will land in Cape Cod. So when Unk lands, followers of this church go out, and that's exactly who they were expecting. Malachi/Unk is now the space wanderer, who is this prophetic, almost savior-like figure in this new religion. When these followers prod Unk to say something, all he says is, "I was a victim of a series of accidents, as all we are," which is exactly what Rumford prophesied he would say. This again just shows the genius of Vonnegut. Most writers would probably want to flex and have this character deliver some grand speech, but you have to remember, Unk still isn't exactly sure what the hell is going on, so I think this is just a great line that this character says. And it's also one of these classic lines that Vonnegut fans love. I could totally see that being a tattoo. Malachi is greeted as sort of a prophet, Jesus figure. All the humans in this new religion are actually carrying weights or blindfolds or some form of a handicap. If they are especially beautiful, they cover their faces or they mess them up somehow, so they don't have any benefits. It's all a part of this religion. You have to have some sort of handicap. And I think it signifies that God is indifferent. He didn't give you these things to bless you, so if you have these things, you might as well just shun them. From Cape Cod, Malachi is then taken back to the mansion in Newport where Rumford will materialize. And it's funny, Beatrice and Chrono are selling little Malachi figurines outside of the mansion. A crowd is there, and when Malachi gets there, Rumford is there and he materializes, and then he gives a big speech to Malachi and the crowd. Rumford tells Malachi that he's useless, he wasted away his talents, hoarded wealth, and has never done a single good thing in his life. Rumford uses Malachi and Beatrice for an example of humanity at its worst. Rumford tells Malachi that he should get on the ship and go to Titan. Malachi feels so crummy being berated in front of this crowd that he does. Then, to really stick it to Malachi, Rumford gives Malachi one more chance and asks him if he has done any good deeds in his life. Malachi, again not remembering a lot, his memory was wiped clean on Mars, says he thinks he remembers having a friend named Stoney Stevenson. And then Rumford lets him know that Malachi actually killed Stoney Stevenson. The Unk/Malachi and Stoney Stevenson relationship is one of the most depressing storylines I've read. It's really sad. Malachi had no idea that he killed Stoney. When Malachi was on Mercury and Mars, he always looked forward to running into Stoney again. His friendship with Stoney was a reminder that maybe he was a good person and that someone cared about him. When Rumford tells him that he killed Stoney, I think that's as low as it can get. And it's not like Malachi even wanted to do that. He was controlled through the antenna to kill this person. So in Titan, Malachi, Beatrice, and Chrono will meet up with Rumford, who is residing there permanently with a Tralfamadorian named Salo. This novel, Sirens, explores the question of whether free will and agency exists, or if humans are controlled by others. It's a question that almost everyone has probably wrestled with, especially if you believe in God. You believe you have choices to make, but you also believe in an omniscient God who knows everything past, present, and future. So are your choices actually your own, or is free will an illusion? The travels of Malachi and all these characters shows that free will is actually an illusion. None of the characters in this story have free will. There are characters who control others and characters who are the controlled. Rumford seems to be controlling everything that happens to Malachi, Beatrice, their son Chrono, and also everyone else. Martian soldiers are controlled through antennas in their head to do whatever they want, and even their memories are controlled. Rumford devised this war and he knew the Martians would fail. He controlled specifically where Malachi would be and for how long. It's funny that Rumford doesn't even find this enjoyable. Rumford says predicting the future is depressing since he crashed into the Chronosynclastic infundibula. I think Rumford does this. He brings Malachi, Beatrice, and Chrono to Titan so that he can have some company. But by the time they get there, he dematerializes and he's no longer on Titan. And although free will is an illusion and doesn't exist, these characters think that they have free will. Especially Rumford. There are instances when these characters fight against the external forces and seem to have the free will. Unk learns from the letter that he feels pain from the antenna and that the pain usually means he is seeing something or learning something that he is not supposed to. He rebels against the higher-ups of the Martian army to learn these truths. Back to the Tralfamadorian Salo. Salo is on a mission to deliver a message. Salo gets stranded on Titan when his spaceship breaks down and he becomes friends with Rumford. Now, Salo is a machine. He's programmed to follow and obey orders. Salo is the only one who understands that he has no free will and he is programmed a certain way and he won't go against his programming. But in the end, Salo breaks his programming and makes certain choices. Before Malachi, Beatrice, and Chrono get to Titan, Rumford and Salo sort of have an argument over this message that Salo is carrying. Rumford wants to see it and Salo says he cannot show it to him. He cannot open it. Rumford is mean to him and then dematerializes, and Salo feels so bad that he opens the letter containing the message and then he destroys himself. And this is another classic Vonnegut. He's traveled thousands of years and miles, and the message is just a little dot, which in Tralfamadorian just means greetings. For being a machine, Salo has the most human emotions of any character. So in this story, Rumford realizes that he was never in control at all, that all of this was orchestrated by Tralfamadorians to get this message from their planet to another. Rumford was just a puppet of the Tralfamadorians. The Tralfamadorians were watching Earth like its own ant farm, and they were manipulating everything just to get Chrono's metal lucky piece back to Salo, because that was the missing piece that would fix Salo's spaceship. So going back to Unk, it seemed he was rebelling against the army, but it also just could have been orchestrated by the Tralfamadorians anyway. So really, I think any instant where someone thinks they're making a free will choice, it's honestly just controlled by someone else. Salo seems to be genuinely sad when Rumford dematerializes. And years later, Malachi puts Salo back together, and they use Chrono's lucky piece to fix his spaceship, and Salo offers to take Malachi back to Earth. Salo drops an old Malachi off at a bus stop in Indianapolis. Salo realizes that at this point Malachi is old and he's going to die soon, so he programs him to have a good memory or a vision of Stoney Stevenson visiting him. And again, this is a good memory, but it's all orchestrated by someone else. Malachi's entire life was just basically a lie. None of his choices were his own. Everything was manipulated from someone else. None of these characters have free will, and even Rumford, who was doing all these horrible things, summed it up perfectly when he said, "Nobody likes to think he's being used," which is hilarious coming from a guy who was using everyone. This novel depicts humanity's search for meaning and the role that religion plays in this. In the beginning of the book, it says Jim Crack religions were all the rage, before everyone understood how to find meaning. The book, I think, is saying that religious institutions and systems are illusions and a complete waste of time. Placing humans in the center of the universe, being guided by a loving and caring God, is the exact opposite of what Rumford does. Rumford gets followers by predicting the future events and telling them to take care of each other, and that God will take care of himself. The characters also spend a lot of time alone and in isolation. Malachi and Boaz spend 2 years alone on Mercury, and Chrono is also a very isolated person and revels in loneliness. Now when Chrono gets to Titan, he takes to these flock of birds and they adopt him in, and it really finds his place amongst these birds. In the beginning of the book, we see a brief story about Malachi's father, who also lived in loneliness and isolation. He just lived in a hotel room by himself. Malachi's father made a fortune in the stock market by just investing with the letters from Bible verses. I find it hilarious that he used the Bible, which is another comment on religion. You would think that these characters would place some importance to the Bible, but they honestly don't. And I guess in the end, the Tralfamadorians were probably controlling all of this too. It's interesting, Vonnegut's own family also lost a lot of wealth during the stock market crash of 1929. I think Vonnegut views wealth as lucky and something that is fickle. If you make a lot of money, it's probably luck, and you can lose it all in just an instant. Salo gives the purpose of human life to Malachi after he's been on Titan for a long time, and he really starts to fall in love with Beatrice. They only see each other every once in a while when he goes and cleans the pool. But Salo says, "A purpose of human life, no matter who is controlling it, is to love whoever is around to be loved." Although the characters struggle with loneliness, lack of free will, whether they know it or not, and unfortunate events, some of them do find this higher purpose. Malachi finds love with Beatrice, only to have Beatrice die shortly after, so Malachi cannot catch a break. Boaz finds the harmoniums in Mercury, and Chrono finds a place amongst the flock of birds on Titan. And also Malachi's final moment is with this friend Stoney Stevenson, even though it was orchestrated by Salo. Even though it wasn't a real memory, his friendship did seem real. There's so much depth to this book, so much humor and sadness. I felt entertained and enlightened. Vonnegut is one of my favorite authors, like a lot of people. This book was the right thing for me, and I think it definitely will be the right thing for you. I think everyone should definitely read this book. No matter anyone's beliefs, it would be wise to heed the words of Salo and just love whoever is around to be loved. There's a lot to take from this book. I'm sure I missed something. There's so many cool lines and moments. Let me know what your favorite moment of this book was in the comments section. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, see you next time.